Tamsin Silver. I'm one of the authors with Falstaff Books, and welcome to part 2 of reading the first chapter of The Curse of Billy the Kid, which is the first book in the Untold Legends series coming out this May. Because it's a longer chapter, I split this into 2 different sections and videos for you to watch. So hopefully you liked part 1. Thank you for returning for part 2, and we'll get started. All right. We will start off with, it's the 1878 section. All right. Except for the activity around the saloons, it was quiet along the 1-mile-long Lazy S of Lincoln's main road. Staying low, we moved silently through the night, hiding behind the houses west of McSween's. Looking up, the clouds blocked my view of the moon. What time is it? Brewer pulled out a pocket watch and hit it with his other hand. If this is right, it's just about after midnight. Then we might have time for a base burner at the saloon after we see what Dolan's up to. Brewer removed his hat, shook the snow off the wide brim, and placed it back on his head. You know you're barking at a knot with all this, right? We'll see. Come on. We looped around the back of the Wortley Hotel and Diner, crossed the street, and used the shadows and darkness to work our way to the west side of the Dolan store. The building itself was the only 2-story in town of Lincoln, and though the main structure was a large rectangular shape, there had been a smaller 2-level room added to the west side. Using this to our advantage, we peered around the corner of it and saw a large group of workers. Looks like this is where the action is. Hell, if action's what you wanted, we can head back to Ike's for a drink, Dick offered. You're funny, I said flatly, pointing to the back portion of J.J. Dolan and Company. Look at all the lanterns. They're all lit up. There's 10 to 15 people going in and out as if it's the middle of the afternoon. They seem to be loading in merchandise from those covered wagons. Nothing big about that, Dick observed. Except it's the middle of the night. The only time John would unload at this hour was when he didn't want Dolan to see, Dick said, finishing my sentence. I grinned. Exactly. Come on, I want a better look. We moved closer and hid behind the outhouse. Now we could see the back of the building just fine. Men were carrying large boxes into the building, and due to the size and length, it should have taken 2 men each to move them. Instead, 1 man would lift a box as if it were full of feathers, so I commented on this. Brewer brushed it off. They're probably empty. I raised an eyebrow at him. That makes no dadgum sense. Hell, even if you're right, those boxes are too long. Even our strongest ranch hands would need help. I don't know what to tell you, Billy. The full moon escaped the cloud cover for a moment, and I peered around the corner, the cold wind blowing in my face, to see a squabble break out between 2 of the men. A box dropped, causing a ton of ammunition cartridges to roll into the snow. I pointed the heavy contents out to Brewer as heated words between the men turned into punches. 1 man was as large and bald as I'd ever seen, and the other was short and scrawny. I started to bet Brewer some of my poker winnings on the outcome. Wait, what's going on? Dick whispered, looking over my shoulder. Before I could reply, the little guy hit the other man in the chest with both hands, sending him flying a good 20 feet back. Landing, he skidded another 10, easy. Criminy, I whispered. Did you see that? If I say no, can we leave? Dick replied. The smaller of the 2 dropped to all fours, his back arching in a horrible and impossible way before running at the big man. He disappeared behind the covered wagons, and I assumed he'd gone into the store. The fight was over, but just then the night air filled with a howl so strong it vibrated my eardrums. The next second, an enormous wolf bolted into view, heading straight for the bald man. We need to go, Brewer said, grabbing my arm. Where'd the wolf come from? I asked at the same time. I sure as hell don't want to find out. Now let's go before it picks up our scent. The wolf collided with a large man who didn't appear frightened in the least, and they tumbled along the ground, snow and dirt flying about. Yeah, we need to go, I said, my eyes now on the back door where people were gathering. Wait until we... The rest of my sentence escaped me as I just stared at the door in shock. Wait until what? Dick demanded when I didn't complete my sentence. I couldn't reply. A woman I recognized from my past had exited the door, tying my tongue. She was slight in stature, with a small waist cinched in, making her skirts seem fuller and her bosom larger. That can't be, I whispered. I'm leaving with or without you, Dick said. My mind was spinning so loud I barely heard him. The woman yelled at the fighting pair, who stopped immediately, faced her, and dropped their heads to stare at the ground like scolded children. She continued to bark orders, pointing to the spilled cartridges while saying something about being finished before sunrise. I would have sat there longer if Dick hadn't pulled my arm. Losing my balance, I reached out to save my backside from landing in the snow. My hand hit the corner of the shed with a heavy slap, drawing the attention of all outside the store to turn our way. Dick and me stopped moving and breathing until the woman began to start giving orders again. Once the woman began to start giving orders, I let out a breath. We gotta go. That's what I've been saying, Dick complained through his teeth. Luckily, the moon was hidden again, and we ran through the dark as fast as we ever had, returning to McSween's without so much as a word between us. Entering the house, we found everyone still awake in the parlor, talking about political maneuvers. Brewer and me nonchalantly slipped into the room, and I stood there listening to arguments, even making a few of my own until my head could take no more. Taking a seat, I dozed in and out until just before sunup. Shaking the remnants of bad dreams from my head, I rose and slipped out into the patio area as the sun flipped up over the horizon, making the unmarked snow on the mountains glisten like the surface of a lake on a windless day. I could hear nature starting to wake up and talk, so I lit a cigarette and closed my eyes to listen. Blowing smoke into the cold air, I stretched my neck with a pop and a crack. I was tuckered out, but at least the snow had stopped falling. Not surprised to hear someone else join me to escape the discussion still going on inside, I turned to see it was Brewer. He stood next to me, looking up at the mountains without saying a word. Finally, I said, "We speak nothing of what we saw. You hear?" Dick looked dragged out. Rubbing his face to wake up, he caused the blonde hair of his mustache to go askew before dragging both hands through his wide, dark blonde curls that perpetually had what my mama called bedhead. With a heavy sigh, he said, "Who'd believe us anyway?" "No one," I told him. Again, we stood in silence. When I finished my smoke and turned to head back, he said, "I actually came out here to tell you that the new guy, Patrick Garner, he wants to speak with us after we go to see Wilson and sign affidavits that state who killed John." "Okay, why?" "Don't know." He paused and said, "What if he asks where we were last night? We say nothing. Anyone who introduces themselves with, 'I was never here, never mentioned you saw me,' isn't someone I trust right off the bat. Besides, we don't know nothing about that Alabama boy or why he's even here," I pointed out. A voice from behind us said, "Well, that Alabama boy is here to help you get justice for Tunstall." It was Garner himself. All 6'3" of him, looking like a barber's clerk in my opinion, already dressed in his suit at this early hour. I should have been embarrassed he heard us talking, but I was too tired to care. "And we appreciate that, Mr. Garner," Dick said. I huffed and opened the door to the West Wing drawing room. "I'm going to take a nap until we go sign affidavits. I'll catch y'all when the sun's higher in the sky." I entered the door to the West drawing room and shut the door just as I heard Garner ask Brewer where we'd been while McSween and the rest had been making plans. I was half tempted to go back there to make sure he kept his mouth shut, but I trusted Brewer. Exhaustion causing my head to feel like I was breathing in and out through my ears, I shook my head to steady my blurry vision and went into the next room. It was a small bedroom appointed for visitors to catch a few hours down. I removed my cartridges and weapons and set them within arm's reach. Still in my clothes, I lay down and shut my eyes and prayed I wouldn't dream of wolves. 1949 section. Just remembering my exhaustion back then seemed to make my eyes burn with it now. I needed sleep if I was going to get moving early tomorrow. The sooner I figured out what happened to Fletcher, a missing regulator, the faster I'd be out of New Mexico and the memories of this place that haunted me could recede back into the recesses of my brain. Opening the door to my hotel room, I quickly swept it, gun drawn, to find it empty. Placing my guns in strategic locations around the room, I undressed, laid out my things for the morning, and got a shower before dropping onto the cool sheets of the hotel bed, the smell of laundry detergent puffing up around me. I sneezed, sensitive nose and all. Getting the pillow the way I liked, I closed my eyes and tried not to think about that night when I'd seen that wolf for the first time. I'd worried I'd dream of them, but I hadn't. Instead, I've dreamt of the woman I'd seen at Dolan's and the section of my childhood she'd been a part of. Mary had been the first teacher who'd given a damn about me. I once overheard my guardians talking about how I'd transferred my affection from my mother, who'd recently passed away, to her. Looking back, that's very likely was true, for I missed my mother dearly back then. Hell, I still did. We were a lot alike, her and me. I even favor her, and not just the light brown hair, but my blue eyes, baby face, delicate hands, and slender build were all her. She had a good head for business, which I sadly didn't inherit, but she'd been great with people, had a witty sense of humor, was a wonderful cook, could sing like a songbird, and loved to dance. Those traits I got. Chuckling to myself at the memory of her dancing with me as a boy, I allowed myself to drift off to sleep. I had a lot to do tomorrow, including introducing myself to the new sheriff of Lincoln County. I didn't have high hopes about that. Not at all. And that is the end of Chapter 1 to The Curse of Billy the Kid, Book 1 in the Untold Legends series by Falstaff Books. Thanks for tuning in to see this. If you enjoyed it and we get lots of comments, I'll do Chapter 2 a little later. I'm also going to do a series where I talk about or I read some of the articles about Billy the Kid. One of the ones that I know will be really interesting for people will be this image, could it really be Billy? The whole croquet picture issue will be something that I talk about at some point. I also do a couple candid things soon about the books that I use, and I'll be live on Facebook on May 5th to talk about this book. So tune in to Facebook in the afternoon. I'll put times on the Facebook page, mine, and there's a Facebook page called The Curse of Billy the Kid. I'll make sure to list what time I'll be live there, and you'll be able to ask me questions about Billy, about writing, about pretty much anything you want. So hopefully you'll tune in then. Thanks for coming back to see the second half of Chapter 1, and take care of yourself out there.